According to our most recent Stadium Connectivity Outlook survey, adding wireless capacity is the top initiative for venues in 2025. And when it comes to adding cellular capacity to a venue, one of the most popular methods is by installing a distributed antenna system, or DAS. Recently, the market for DAS equipment suppliers has seen some radical shakeup, with longtime providers CommScope and Corning selling off their DAS product businesses. That disruption may provide some market share opportunity for another player in the market, SOLiD, which is making a move back into sports and entertainment venues in the United States. Joining us today on the Stadium Tech Report podcast is Shane Hague, Senior Vice President of Sales and Business Development for SOLiD, who will talk about where SOLiD has been and where it is going from a technology and provider standpoint. With a wide product portfolio and some success stories in complex environments like transportation systems, SOLiD has a good DAS story to tell. So listen in, only on the Stadium Tech Report podcast. Shane, thanks for joining us today. Well, I know some of our podcast listeners know that SOLiD has been around the stadium wireless business before. The name might be new to some people in our audience. So can you maybe start out with a short history of the company, how it got formed, and what its plans are for the U.S. market?
Absolutely. And good to be back, Paul. Thanks for having us. Yeah, SOLid's actually not new to the industry, but kind of a quietly kept secret, I guess. Company was founded in South Korea, Seoul, South Korea in 1998. So we had our 25-year anniversary last year. Entered the U.S. market in 2009, formed a standalone business entity in the North American region in 2010. And we've been operating here ever since. Historically, at least in the U.S. and North American market, we're known as a DAS provider, but we're also very active and successful in commercial, in fact, in the Open RAN space, which is a newer, hotter topic. And we're also actually a provider of optical solutions in other parts of the world, just not here in the U.S. So, we've quietly actually been involved in sports venues. We'll talk a little bit more later. And early on in our history here, we were, I'd say, more participative. But we have about 30 professional and college sports venues that utilize SOLiD equipment just in the U.S. And a lot of very successful deployments in Asia and Europe. But here in the States, our approach to the market has been a little bit unique in terms of less direct engagement. I think that leads to part of the reason that we're not as well known. Our marketing efforts here have just largely been traditionally focused on supporting our partners, the carriers, the third-party owners, the systems integrators. In fact, in South Korea, where we're based, there are no neutral hosts. There aren't systems integrators. All the engagement with the venues happens strictly between the carriers and the OEMs. So, with that legacy mindset, breaking into a new market with a much more dynamic, let's call it customer base, is probably a little bit of a challenge for us. But this year we've kind of come to recognize that given that we're healthy and the marketplace is changing, we're going to make a reinvestment into the sports and entertainment space.
Well, that's great. I think I'd like to start out, who pays for a DAS? Because in these days, the carriers' budgets, like everybody else, are tightening, and they're talking about wanting lower participation costs for DAS. The real question, I guess, is there any free lunch for venue owners for DAS anymore, or should they expect to finance part of the deployment?
Is there a free lunch? Well, I guess it depends on the venue, right? And the "it depends" answer is probably the least liked one in this space. But, I think we've been hearing from the carriers pretty loud and clear for about 2 years now. We started hearing around the summer of 23 that a lot of venue projects were stalling out, that they weren't moving forward, the prices were too high. I think the carriers were sending a pretty clear message that they wanted to kind of reestablish where the goal line was.
Right.
So certainly, if it's a new NFL stadium and it's slotted for a Super Bowl, or it's an NBA venue and there's an All-Star game coming, or MLB, NHL, those projects tend to find a way to get done. But sometimes at the cost of multiple other projects in the territory. So it actually can slow down the number of total projects that get done. I think we were at the one of the industry shows a couple of months ago in Texas. One of the operators was on stage and indicated if it's NFL, NBA, if it's major sports or one of the top 50 airports, they had an appetite and an interest in participating, I believe was the language that was used, as long as it was a reasonable, transparent engagement where they could help understand and drive the performance specification. The indication they provided was that what they called the second tier, or the venues that fall outside of that pro sports and top 50 airports, that the message should be to the venue owner, we need your participation. We expect you, the venue owner, to participate in some fashion. And then as you go down the scale to the much, much smaller projects that aren't really relevant to this publication, their message was end users should actually pay for everything, including even the signal source. So we've seen this shift in mindset, but it doesn't seem unreasonable. I think it's probably a good thing for all if we could change the mindset to be one of joint participation. We would probably see the overall scale of projects increase as opposed to just the big, really big ones getting done. So some of the things that are that we're seeing to change that, a lot of the, we'll call them newer or alternative network as a service models that are being brought forth by the traditional large tower companies and third-party owners, as well as alternative neutral host companies, are bringing an as a service model where it can turn into more of a monthly expenditure. We're also seeing some venues realize that if they put some portion of skin in the game, whether it's providing the fiber, doing the power utility infrastructure improvements, building out the head end room, creating the cable path, etc. There's ways that they can contribute even if it's not CapEx, but certainly the CapEx is welcome. So that's the general shift we're seeing. I think we could characterize it as it's almost a bit of a gamble for the venue owner. If they choose not to participate at all and they expect the system paid for by others, the risk is that they may open the venue or have a season or two without all the carriers represented, or sometimes even with no carriers represented. And if they feel like they want to put some skin in the game, contribute, I think what we're seeing is the operators are more willing to hurry up and make a commitment to participate.
That's pretty consistent with what we're hearing as well during our research. But I would ask you a little bit more. When the venue owners and operators are being asked to participate in the funding of the DAS deployments, it's my guess that they also want to know more about the equipment they'll be purchasing, right? They don't
True.
just mail it in anymore. So can you talk a little bit about how SOLiD's offering differs from competitors? And what is the value proposition for choosing SOLiD?
Yeah, and you nailed it. There seemed to be a new generation of IT and technology folks. They want to understand any layer of architecture that goes in their building. What's interesting about SOLiD is it's kind of the what's old is new again. I think we're the only major OEM, I'm pretty confident that we are, that brought forth a product in 2009 and continues that same product forward today. We call it the Alliance DAS. The uniqueness about it is it's modular and scalable. So when we create an upgrade to it, we make sure it's backwards compatible, and then the modularity allows you to basically refresh and renew an existing system by changing out amplifiers, frequency bands, subcomponents that will allow the system to accommodate all the new bands of service. So that's kind of the overarching benefit of our platform, is that modularity and the fact that it's been one product line since 2009. I think some of our competitors have had to put out to pasture 2 or 3 products in that time, which requires then an upgrade, a rip and replace upgrade at a venue. The other thing that historically we haven't been as successful in that we've addressed now is the head end size. Okay. Specifically in sports venues, you got this incredible capacity need, because of the way that American consumers utilize bandwidth in the venue. Your own reports demonstrate the upload overwhelming the download and all the fact that people are streaming and sharing content. It's not necessarily true around the rest of the world. So the density of capacity in the sports venues in the US requires a tremendous amount of head-end equipment at the base station equipment room. Our history has been that we've had a modest-sized head end. We've really aggressively addressed that. In the second half of this year, we'll be releasing our 4th generation of our Alliance head end. We call it the NBIU. And that product is expected to decrease head-end space from the solid portion of the DAS at least by 50 to 70%. So that's going to be a significant change for us that we just didn't offer before. And then the other part that's really significant is we've always been an incredibly efficient amplifier developer, meaning the amount of electrical utility you use in exchange for the amount of RF output power that you generate. There's a ratio there. And the more efficient you are with RF energy and electrical utility, the lower the utility cost, the less heat is generated in the telco rooms and the head end room, which means that lowers the electricity bill for HVAC and cooling the space. So we have really a story to tell around sustainability. In fact, we really believe that our Alliance DAS has the most sustainable remote option. We have a product called the Edge ROU or eROU, which is fiber to the remote instead of the traditional fiber to the closet and then coax out to the antenna. This is a product that enables fiber to the closet and then fiber out to the remote, or fiber directly out to the remote. That is the smallest, lightest weight, most power efficient remote of any of the DAS products in the States. You combine that with our traditional Alliance platform, and we now have the eROU, which is sub 1 watt, a 2 watt, 5 watt, a 20 watt, and a 40 watt remote option. So that means if you're designing a complex venue that has back of house areas, parking, open air spaces, under seat, etc., you can deliver just the right amount of RF power where you need it to that part of the venue. So you're not wasting RF power and consuming unneeded electrical utility. So we think that our sustainability story is really unique as well. And that's going to resonate given the current situation around venues wanting to be as green as possible. So when we're left to a merit-based decision, when a carrier or a third-party owner or an integrator is allowed to choose a DAS based strictly on technical merits, performance, support, value, sustainability, we win very, very frequently. Historically, we won some of the largest soccer and football and pro sports venues around the world, largely just based purely on technical merit, performance, and specs.
I'd like to circle back a little bit and talk a little bit more about carriers because, given the relative small sizes of most venues, IT teams, it's perhaps not surprising that a lot of them don't have long-standing or great relationships with carriers. It's not something they deal with on a day-to-day basis. Can you talk a little bit about how a SOLiD deals with carriers? In what your relationship is with them. I mean, you're probably talking to them on a daily basis.
Yeah, you bet. In fact, if we're being honest, it's the carriers that carried us into the business here in the U.S. in terms of allowing us to scale. So they buy and deploy our equipment, which then also allows them to approve and participate on our systems, that are led by integrators, third-party owners, and venues directly. Also, there's a carrier teaming group, or sometimes known as a carrier consortium group.
Right.
When those groups get together, many times they have selected SOLiD equipment as well, and that's a mutual decision made by the carriers. Lastly, what I'll say is I mentioned Open RAN a little bit. We're a commercial Open RAN supplier in the U.S., and that has the attention of two of the three carriers significantly. They know what we're doing in that space. They're aware that we manufacture and design and develop radios in the Open RAN market, and that's expanding our relationship within the carriers at the RAN planning, the sourcing, and the CTO organizations. So my humble opinion, our stock is rising with all three of the carriers in the U.S. as a result of that.
Open RAN is definitely going to be on our radar for the near term future because of the promise it can bring. And speaking of future things, maybe we can spend a few minutes here crystal ball thinking. Can you look ahead to the future and maybe give our audience some insight on where the SOLiD technology path is headed, and what cool stuff are you guys working on for a little bit farther on down the road?
Sure. I've been here well over a decade, as I mentioned. We have never had more things cooking on the stove than ever before. We're launching multiple new products in the next year and a half. I'll give a tremendous amount of credit to Slavko Jukic, our VP of Technology and Product Line Management, and the commitment from our R&D team in Korea. They've never been as eager to invest in solutions for the North American market. Next, I would say the hottest topic is the Open RAN, as we just talked about. We have been sneakily a commercial supplier in the US. We've delivered over 17,000 commercial radio units to one of the large tier 1 carriers. However, we delivered those through a great customer, which is one of the major RAN OEMs. So we're not allowed to disclose that, but folks in the industry are figuring it out. We're now taking that technology and commercializing it for ourselves under our own brand. And the big exciting news, which probably got lost in the holiday days between Christmas and New Year's, was last week of the year, we were awarded a roughly $27 million grant from the federal government for something called NOFO 2, which is basically an Open RAN development program that the government is funding. And that money is basically put toward SOLiD building out a team over the next 2 years to further develop and advance that Open RAN technology, and then to interoperate with a variety of RAN providers and baseband equipment providers at the request of and in partnership with the carriers. The short version of what that's going to do for us is imagine our next generation DAS headend, the NBIU, having an integrated DAS signal source that's O-RAN based, eliminating the need for that standalone traditional radio signal source. So that's the kind of the outcome of this effort, and that's what the operators are asking us to move toward to help modernize and further shrink the cost, the space, the power consumption, and the footprint of a DAS, especially at the head end.
It seems like there's a refreshed energy, like you guys are.
Thank you for saying that. Sometimes it's just kind of fun to watch the roller coaster. There's cycles in this business. For the old guard here at SOLiD, the product is performing well. We're healthy, and it just feels like this is the right time to get after it. So this is a year for us to come and reclaim the space that we feel like we would fill very well. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about that.
You bet. As always, Stadium Tech Report will remain interested in following all the news and all the developments. So thanks once again to Shane Hague from SOLiD for participating in the Stadium Tech Report podcast. Thanks, Shane.
Thanks, Paul. Great to see you.